April 1945. Dawn over the Rhine. A thin mist clings to the water like a shroud. In the ruined village of Remagen, just west of the shattered Ludendorff Bridge, a column of German prisoners shuffles forward under the watchful eyes of American MPs. Among them walk women in field-gray uniforms, their boots caked with the mud of retreat, their faces hollowed by weeks without proper rations. The air smells of wet earth, cordite, and the faint sweetness of spring blossoms that have somehow survived the shelling. One young Hilfswillige, barely 19, clutches the sleeve of her comrade as they are marched toward a makeshift holding area beside a half-collapsed bakery. The only sound is the crunch of boots on rubble and the low murmur of American voices. This moment, unremarkable in the vast ledger of war, would soon become legend inside the Reich's collapsing morale. It marked the first time thousands of German servicewomen, auxiliaries of the Wehrmacht, Luftwaffe signal troops, searchlight crews, and flock helpers confronted the full, tangible reality of American abundance. For 4 years, they had been told that the United States was a decadent, rootless plutocracy whose soldiers were soft, undisciplined gangsters who fought only for money and chewing gum. Propaganda reels had shown grinning GIs looting French villages, jazz records spinning while Europe burned. Yet here, on a cold April morning, the myth met flesh. The German High Command had mobilized women on a scale unmatched by any other belligerent. By early 1945, more than 500,000 served as Helferinnen, replacing men sent to the front. They operated radios, plotted aircraft on glowing tables, manned 88mm guns, endured the same bombings as the men. They had been promised that Nazi socialism would protect the racial community, that every sacrifice would be rewarded with final victory. Instead, they marched now with torn greatcoats, stomachs knotted from weeks of ersatz coffee and sawdust bread. Their monthly calorie rations had fallen below 1,200 for civilian women. Military auxiliaries fared little better. Gaunt cheeks and brittle hair told the story Goebbels' posters could no longer hide. American soldiers of the 99th Infantry Division, fresh from crossing the Rhine, formed 2 loose lines to process the prisoners. Their uniforms were clean, their boots polished despite the mud. From their pockets and musette bags spilled an embarrassment of riches: Camel cigarettes in soft packs, Wrigley's spearmint still wrapped in green foil, tins of Spam, cans of peaches in heavy syrup, and chocolate. Hershey's tropical bars designed to withstand jungle heat, thick, almost black, wrapped in olive drab paper. To the Germans, it looked like bricks of solid gold. A sergeant with a Midwest accent, helmet pushed back, stepped forward. Without ceremony, he broke a bar in 2 and handed half to the nearest Helferin, a blonde girl from Stuttgart whose hands trembling from cold and fear. She stared at the offering as though it might explode. Then, instinctively, she brought it to her nose. The scent, rich, sweet, impossible, struck her like a physical blow. Tears welled instantly. She did not chew, she simply held the chocolate against her lips and wept, shoulders shaking. Within moments, the gesture rippled down the column. Bar after bar passed from American hands to German ones. Some women laughed through tears. Others sank to their knees in the mud, cradling the bars like infants. One whispered, almost inaudibly, "Wir haben verloren," we have lost. Not a single woman refused the gift. Combat reports filed that day by the 99th Division noted the phenomenon with clinical detachment. Female POWs displayed extreme emotional reaction upon receiving candy rations. Several required medical attention for hysterical weeping. A U.S. Army intelligence officer attached to 1st Army wrote in his diary, "They cried over chocolate the way our boys cry over letters from home." By evening, the story had spread up and down the Rhine bridgehead. Correspondents cabled it home. Stars and Stripes ran a small item titled, "Jerry Girls Weep for Hershey Bars." But the deeper meaning took longer to surface. For these women, the chocolate bar became the recurring symbol, an object so ordinary to Americans that it was issued by the millions, yet so scarce in the Reich that it shattered ideology more effectively than any leaflet. In the fading Reich, cocoa had vanished from shops by 1941. The last civilian ration, 100 grams per month, ended in 1943. Even officers' messes served acorn coffee and saccharin-sweetened ersatz. Children born after 1939 had never tasted real chocolate. To receive an entire bar, unbroken, unshared, from the hand of the enemy was to confront the lie at the heart of the thousand-year Reich. The promise of plenty had been a mirage. The Americans did not need to shout slogans. The chocolate spoke for them. Interrogation transcripts preserved in the U.S. National Archives revealed the transformation in stark terms. Oberhelferin Erika S., age 22, from Munich, stated on 9th April 1945, "When he gave me the chocolade, I suddenly understood that everything we were told about America was false. They are not starving. They are not weak. They have so much they can give it to prisoners. That is when I knew the war was truly over." Another, Lieutenant Ilse K., a flak battery plotter, wrote in a letter smuggled home, later captured, "The taste is still in my mouth. It tastes like defeat, but also like mercy. I am ashamed, but I am grateful." Within weeks, the phrase Tränen für Schokolade, tears for chocolate, entered the lexicon of surrender. German radio intercepts recorded soldiers on the Eastern Front joking bitterly that soon the Russians would hand out vodka and the Americans chocolate, and everyone would cry for both. Desertion rates among rear area female personnel spiked in May 1945. Many cited the Remagen incident in their voluntary statements. The propaganda ministry attempted damage control, claiming the bars were laced with hormones to sterilize German womanhood. Few believed it. The truth was sweeter and far more devastating. In the vast machinery of industrial war, one Hershey's bar weighed only 4 ounces, yet in that spring of 1945 it carried the weight of an entire civilization's surplus. It told the German women, without a single bullet fired in anger at them, that the side with abundance had already won. Not just the war of steel and gasoline, but the deeper war of belief. The tears that fell in Remagen were not merely for sugar and cocoa butter. They were the first public mourning for a future that would never arrive, for a Volksgemeinschaft that starved its daughters while its enemies fed its captives from an inexhaustible stores. Years later, in the quiet of displaced persons camps in rebuilt cities, many of those same women would remember the chocolate as the moment the scales fell from their eyes. Some kept the olive drab wrappers pressed between pages of diaries, relics of a revelation more intimate than any courtroom at Nuremberg. The Hershey's Tropical Bar, designed to survive heat and time, became the quiet sacrament of American victory, proof that freedom, in its most elemental form, can taste like sweetness shared with the defeated. And so, on an April morning beside a broken bridge, beneath a sky still gray with war, a generation of German women learned that empires fall not only to bombs and tanks, but to the gentlest of weapons. A simple bar of chocolate, freely given, impossible to refuse. In that small, overwhelming gesture lay the promise that abundance and mercy could coexist, that a nation strong enough to conquer could also be generous enough to feed its captives. The tears that stained the mud of Remagen were the first tears of a new Europe, tasting for the very first time what freedom might yet become.